What's up, 1851 World? This week we're joined by Sean Fitzgerald, CFE.
Yes, Certified Franchise Executive.
Hey, I have it too. So we are certified to give you the week's news, something like that. All right, so we got three big things to talk to you about this week. One is the website awards, which we released on Monday on the site. We highlighted the top 40 that had submitted their website for voting. Sean, what are some of the things that you noticed, maybe some of the positive trends that are happening with franchise development websites?
I think the websites themselves are looking more aesthetically pleasing. I mean, it catches the eye. It's really nice design, so I think that's something that's trending. It's not just an information page anymore. That they're using technology to help enhance the website. A lot more use of item 19, which I think really helps tell the story. If you want to capture someone's attention and you get some item 19 earnings claims right on the home page to get people engaged in the process, I think is some of the things the trends that I'm seeing, and I think it's very positive.
I think it's gone from set it and forget it to we got to constantly work on this site because we understand that it's such a vital part of the sales process. One of the best comments that we got was from Mosquito Joe, which was one of our first place winners. It said, well, hey Sean, can you tell us what we need to do to make our site better? Well, we just rated you #1 site. So that's good because now franchise brands are looking at their website and saying, hey, we'll get it as close to perfect, and we're going to constantly evolve it to make sure that it's talking properly to the prospect.
Talking properly to the prospect in the type of format that they want, whether it's video, images, text. The more you have to offer, the more you tell the better you can tell your story, the more effective your site's going to be. But I really think, to your point too, is that the set it and forget it is over. That you got to look at, your franchise development website is going to be the first impression they're going to have about your brand. So make it dynamic. Give it some information and make it fresh. Yeah,
I mean, we worked on a website a year ago, and I would have called it first in class, and now you compare it to what everyone else has done, and now they've dipped down. They were actually one of the top 10 sites, but I could find some of those gaps. And now a year later, we have to evolve that site in order to make it relevant to today's prospect. The reality is your prospects are going to do tons of research on you, and if that tool doesn't help guide their due diligence, then you're going to allow them to be in control. And you as a prospect, you should be looking at the quality of that website, because if you're willing to invest and pay a franchise fee, then that footprint that the brand is presenting should look and feel like $1 million. Because if it doesn't, then why are you investing in that brand?
And if you're looking for ideas to how to improve your website, check out these sites. I mean, that's really some of the things that are very innovative. And I think it'll be helpful. Just go through those sites and you can get some good ideas.
So another thing that we started this week was TED Talk Thursdays. And the concept is that we'll give you a TED Talk for any of you that haven't seen them. They're inspirational videos. And there's a company that puts them on called TED. And this week we put on Amanda Palmer, who talks really about asking for help. It's a great video, so go ahead and find it wherever it is, either down or up, depending where this video lands. But try to find that video. It's very powerful. But the whole concept of asking if you need help is something that I don't think happens enough in franchising. And I've talked about it on the Weekly Sizzle before, that I don't know that the industry events challenge best practices. It blew my mind, and there are some awards out there for development, but it blew my mind that no one had put out a best practices for franchise development websites, even though they're such an essential piece of the puzzle, because if you don't have a good website, then you're going to struggle at growing. Nothing's out there. Search for best practices, search for best franchise sites. No one has pieced this together, which is why we tried filling that gap with there. But I mean, you were in the mentor program with IFA. Do you feel that people are still afraid to ask for help when they're struggling, or do they feel that they might have something secret to their formula that no one else has? Why is there this lack of transparency in franchising?
Well, I think particularly the websites, technology is changing so quickly that a lot of times what you're doing today, 6 months from now, may not be as effective or even working anymore. So I think it's just constantly changing, and I think that's why you always have to be looking out and trying to stay ahead of the curve instead of being behind it. I think there is a little bit of, I don't want to give away the secret sauce, because in franchising, even though there are different investment levels and different interest levels that people have, that sometimes perceived as they're all potential candidates, and I don't want to share my best practices. But I really think it comes down to the fact that the way of looking at utilizing the websites and utilizing technology in the franchise awarding process is more and more important, and I just think people may not feel very comfortable in that environment, and so they're slow to react.
And slow to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, look, this publication is there to help guide you, the prospect, and you, the franchisor, through the very heavy, muddy franchising world, in that it's hard to identify best practices. It's hard to figure out how to win. It's not about how much money you have to spend from a budget standpoint today. It's how you're going to spend it. And it's getting more and more and more and more complex, because the prospect is much smarter and the franchisor is not innovating enough. And then on top of that, if the conventions that exist aren't helping you, the franchisor, track through that mud, then it's creating this really tough environment for franchise brands. So the transparency that's in the TED Thursday this week is a great topic, and it actually carried over into my column, which was about grades. Something that we've done at our agency is we've started soliciting the grade feedback every quarter from our clients. Some clients love it, some hate it, some don't like giving feedback, but we try to do it so that we can have transparency and see what we can fix. Going through that process, I felt that that transparency lacked, not just in agency world, but in human world, that we aren't very transparent with asking the questions on how we can do better. And when we ask those questions, it's then up to us to figure out ways to make those problems disappear. Transparency, I feel, is absent in business and in franchising, in websites. I mean, one of the most critical things that you should be able to figure out when you go to a website, especially if there's an item 19, is how much money can I make? And I know you were dinging people for that. So what my column is about is really asking questions, which everything gets turned back to how did this week work out with Web Awards and TED Thursdays, but ask questions. Don't be afraid to try to get better details by asking those around you, whether it's at a convention like what we talked about, whether it's on your website and the way that your forms work. Be transparent. Try to pull that information. Sean, thanks for joining us this week.
Glad to be here.
And that's Weekly Sizzle. Have a great weekend, guys.